Coast Comics. Welcome to 10 Questions, my friend.
Awesome, thank you, Jimmy. I'm so happy to be here. I've watched a bunch of these other ones, and I'm grateful that you even thought of me to be on here. So it should be fun.
Well, it's interesting how I come up with these guests, right, for 10 Questions. Now, if you've watched 10 Questions, I've had a lot of the biggest creators, in the hobby on here. I have people that I find interesting that have cool content, and how No Coast and I actually hooked up is a lot of times if I get a follow on IG, I'll send a little note out, hey, thanks for the follow. Do you care to go over to my YouTube channel and sub me up? And that's just to try to introduce people to the YouTube channel. Well, he messaged me back, said, yeah, man, I'd be glad to. Hey, I've got a channel too. And so I went over and checked out his channel, and I thought, man, this would be a cool guy to have on. So, just that instant thing through IG created this conversation. So I'm excited to have you on because I did dig a lot of the content I saw on your channel. So this is totally new for me. And I think you said you had even stepped away for a little while, right? Hadn't been doing any content for a while.
Yeah, I started a new day job last fall, and that kind of made me reassess how much time I'm spending on certain things. But it's definitely something that I enjoy doing. I have a bunch of content planned, even a few videos recorded. I have to edit still, so it's just making that time to do it. And I definitely have a lot of content coming. So
no, absolutely, man. I totally get it, man. The time commitment, people, and I've talked about this many times with people on this show, is the time commitment that it takes to actually put out content. It would blow people's mind, like really how much work it is and what the grind is with the recording, the editing, getting the upload, the descriptions, trying to make sure everything's perfect. I said it's a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm kind of a chronic overthinker too, so I spend a lot more time editing and all that, than I really need to. Like I could probably set up a webcam and get just as much interaction and content, well, more content made without spending so much time on the editing. But I'm kind of a perfectionist in that way, so that's kind of a downfall when it comes to me making a lot of content. But I'm really going to try to make more like how-to videos and things that are like FAQs for collecting, for new collectors and stuff that brings more people into the hobby. I have a bunch of like unboxings right now, which are still fun in their own regard, but I want to start making more content that really kind of gives back more than just here's my collection.
Sure. No, absolutely. All right. So let's jump into this thing. So question one is always the same. Okay. It's what or who got you into the hobby, whether it be comics or whatever it is that you collect.
Sure. I mean, I think I've always collected, certain things over my lifetime. Like, I remember like my mom had like a really big like bell collection, like bells that make noise. And then
Yeah.
like my dad was really into Star Trek when I was young. I had a brother that was really into He-Man, and then really what started me off, I think, was probably TMNT. I was probably in, I don't know, maybe kindergarten ish, maybe first grade, I don't know. And then really got into those. I had watched the show, had a bunch of toys, and I was fortunate to have a bunch of those toys. And then when Power Rangers came along, that kind of took over for a few years, and then I kind of drifted from that. But I think as far as comics though, probably X-Men, and when that animated show was on. And so all that, I lived in a really small town until we moved to a bigger city when I was in like third grade. And so we'd go to the general, grocery store, and there'd be a spinner rack. And I think one of the, probably around X-Men 300, I want to say, maybe 303, 304, like somewhere around that range was probably my earliest comics that I just, got off the rack, read. And then for a while, I kind of got away from comics and, started going to live shows and, spent a lot of time doing that. And then as I got older and had a little bit of money to spend, I was like, oh yeah, comics. And then it just kind of spiraled from there.
Yeah, that's generally the story, right? Like I want to act like the toys and stuff that you had when you were a kid, like the TMNT, that stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you still have that stuff today?
Well, I do. I've only sold a couple of the TMNTs. Like my mom was always big about doing garage sales and stuff. I mean, she was a collector, but then she knew that there was a point where you just had to let stuff go, which was helpful. And I mean, she still collects stuff, not like she did. Now I think they're on the movies and Blu-rays and all that. But anyway, on me, yeah, I think I have almost all those. I sold like the big Krang, which of course I regret because it was complete and everything was there. But I have most of them. I went through them a few years back, and I have like most of the accessories and kind of paired them up. And actually, just in the last couple months, I've started to buy like the mint on card TMNTs, so on my Instagram, like I just got a Splinter, a Casey Jones, and then the original 4 Turtles, Mike, Leo, Don, and Raph. So I'm starting to buy those again, mint on card, but I still have most of my originals. Yeah.
That's cool. Cool. So, and I find it interesting too. I feel like I say this every show, but it's interesting. You can kind of tell someone's age because a lot of collectors that love TMNT, that love Power Rangers are a certain age group, and also X-Men, because I miss that generation, right? As far as like, I'm a little older, so I'm more of a He-Man, a G.I. Joe, Star Wars, and then Superman, because I tell the story all the time. I had like 3 channels when I was a kid growing up, but I got Sunday morning cartoons, and so I could watch Super Friends. So I'm a DC fan, and so I love DC comics. But that's cool, man. All right, so question 2. If you had to pick the greatest era of comics, in your opinion, what would it be and why?
Sure. I mean, as far as me personally, what I like to collect and what I feel like has made the most impact in today's climate, I'd probably say Silver Age. Just because that's when all of the huge characters that everybody knows were created. Really, I mean, going back to the Golden Age, obviously we got Superman and like everything that started it. But as far as, I'm more of a Marvel guy. I appreciate it, and I enjoy DC stuff. But for me personally, like if I were to find like a collection, for example, because I also buy collections. I'm always looking for Marvel Silver Age. I mean, and as far as the personal impact on me, I think, especially with a lot of those stories, when Stan Lee and all of the story, well, most of the stories back then had kind of like even more alternate meanings, being Jewish writers, and so it's, I don't know, right? Writing today, it's definitely different and entertaining, but as far as the cultural impact, it's hard to beat Silver Age Marvel for me.
Well, no, and that's one of the things, you're right, as far as like those older, that really, comic books in themselves, in my opinion, have really been socially conscious. At different eras, things that are going on. You'll even see that in today's comic books.
Oh yeah.
They'll touch on some social issues, but never more than probably the Silver Age. And when Stan Lee and Kirby and all those guys were kind of coming up, creating these characters and writing. So Silver Age is definitely a good. Is there anything, like, is there a particular character that stands out to you in the Silver Age, or a particular writer or creator?
Sure. I mean, I'm always a huge Kirby fan. And then kind of go a little further than that, I guess, like that Spider-Man run of like 96 to 98. That was like the drug story that broke off, from the comics code. I always loved that story because like the government came to Stan Lee and said, write us a story, basically anti-drug. And then, the comics code said, no, you can't do that. And they said, oh, we're going to do it anyway. And then, got it published, and that kind of led to like, a little bit of loosening, because it was like just a few pages really that would have even been controversial, but they believed in the story so much that they wanted to put that out. So I mean, just little things like that I always like in the history too. But as far as individual characters, I know I strayed from the question a bit, but
Oh, you're all right.
yeah, it's so hard for me to pick like even a top 5 or 10 sometimes, because I'm a chronic overthinker, like I said. But I mean, but yeah, definitely Kirby. I mean, like his style was just something that's artists today definitely try to achieve that level, I think.
No, absolutely. No, I am a massive Kirby fan. Like I said, I'm a DC guy, so I have been working on picking up the runs for the Fourth World.
Nice.
Getting all those books put together, because I love Kirby's art. There's something about his art that I just love. It's kind of that classic look. And then you're right, the stuff that they created over at Marvel, especially, during the Silver Age, really kind of set the table. And I always say Superman's the greatest character ever. He started it all. But that's because I'm a Superman homer.
Yeah.
But the Silver Age is really where comic books kind of became, it was really the genesis of what they became today. Yeah, so good deal. All right, so now, question 3, and I know that you said that, you do buy some collections, you do some things like that, and we'll touch on that here in just a little bit. But I like to hear stories from other collectors about their most epic finds and their most epic failures. So is there one that comes to mind as far as a find? Like, you found some crazy book cheap in the wild, something crazy. Is there any stories like that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have a lot of stories like that. When I started collecting early on, like, again, and actually spending money in the hobby, I mean, this was probably early 2010s. We were going to garage sales and stuff, and it wasn't like a crazy find, but I mean, percentage wise, it probably was. But I found the GI Joe special that Todd McFarlane, or not, it was the homage to the Todd McFarlane cover, right? Because I don't think he did that cover. Am I right on that? You can probably.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes,
yeah,
you're correct.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I didn't really know, what I found. I think I paid $1 for it, and I think I sold it later on for, $10, $20 or something. And that's one that, like, now as I've started to collect a bunch of the Todd McFarlane like homage covers and stuff, I wish I could find that, because I mean, I've never even seen that in a store since then around here. But as far as like epic finds, I mean, a lot of times, somebody will reach out and they'll have a collection. It'll just be, mostly like, Archie random stuff, and there'll be just one like random book that it's like, okay, there's the money. And a couple of years back, well, it was right before the pandemic started. A gentleman reached out to me that had inherited some books from like an uncle years ago, and sending me photos. I'm like, yeah, it's just the usual stuff. And then all of a sudden, he sends me a Fantastic Four #5. I was like, okay, now we got something. So. Yeah. But yeah, I was definitely fortunate to get that book at the right time for sure. And that's one that's definitely for the PC. But yeah, I mean, just like little stories. I mean, that's definitely like the biggest, just like random. Oh, there's definitely something. But as far as garage sales and stuff, and like I'm trying to think of any like mega scores. Yeah, I mean, just pretty much anything that I bought, back in like 2011, 2012. Now I'm glad I bought it then and I kept it. But I definitely have some, to go off the other part of that question, that I regret, letting go of. Like, there was a time where one of my local comic shops had a $1 bin, and it was pretty much like they have a basement, and then like on like the top level was all the prices marked, and then down stay ankle height or whatever, it was almost on the floor, they had all the dollar bins. And so I spent countless hours digging through those. And one time I found over in their U section a bunch of Ultimate Fallout 4s, and I was friends with the owner, so I think there were 20 of them there. So I was like, hey, I found these, you've been really good to me, so I want to be good to you. And at that point, I think it was like maybe a $20-$30 book. And so like I gave him 10, I took the other 10, I was like, I really appreciate it, here you go. So, I got them for $1. I think I sold all of them except one for probably maybe $40 at the time.
Oh no! Yeah,
that's what they were worth. And then one, I think I sent a couple to CGC. I had a 9.6 that came back that I sold for I think 180, and now I have none. So.
Oh no! Yeah. So yeah. Found that many Ultimate Fallout 4s.
Yeah.
And then just saw. Well, I mean. Do you have that though, like seller's remorse? Like, does it bother you? Like I'm one of those people that if I buy something and I sell it, if I made money on it, I'm good, even if it hits down the road. Like I try not to, put too much thought into that. Are you one of those people? Because you said you're an overthinker. So are you one of those people that when, you sell something like that, you think about it?
I mean, I try not to, obviously, but I think it's human nature to, tend to focus on the, things you wish would have gone a different way, but then I just remind myself of all of the times that things have gone a better way. So I try not to get down on myself too much about that, but I definitely wish I would have kept a couple of those Ultimate Fallout 4s.
No, absolutely. Yeah, because that's turned out to be a huge book.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, man. I totally understand. All right. Now, one of the reasons I asked you to be on here is as I was, like I said, I started looking at your channel, looking at your content, and you had a lot of stuff. You had mentioned it earlier, like a lot of how-to videos that you would like to do in the future. Mm-hmm. And I noticed you had a lot of content about like CGC, how to submit to CGC. And there were just, you were doing unboxings of CGC hauls, things like that. Mm-hmm. But do you have an opinion on the grading companies? So the three major ones, right, are CGC, CBCS, and then PGX. I don't know that a lot of people use them, but, they're out there and you hear about them. So Do you have an opinion? Like what I'm asking you to do is kind of compare and contrast,
Sure.
the different companies.
Well, honestly, I only have personal. Here, let me just get here. I only have a personal experience actually submitting to CGC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any personal experience actually sending books to these other companies. Of course, I've seen books, and I've even had. I even have a couple CBCSs right now. It's kind of a weird spot. Like I'm not really into like sports cards and like other facets of grading too much. But as far as comics go, definitely CGC books command a premium over other grading companies. And I've kind of had that where like I'll buy a CBCS book and kind of be like, well, do I want to actually send this into CGC or crack it or just keep it? And so I think like that their verified signature program is great. That as long as I don't know if there's been any info as far as anything that ever came out that one of the signatures they verified was not legit. I haven't heard anything about that. So as long as that program maintains legitimacy and consistency on that, I think that's a great service because CGC, obviously if you send it and you get a green label for qualified. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely go on about all of the different facets of grading and pros and cons and all that. But yeah, CGC is definitely where I've spent all of my time in the grading world, I guess, as far as personally submitting.
Well, let's talk about that. You said,
Yeah.
the pros and cons of grading and things like that. So kind of talk to me about the pros and cons of grading comic books.
Sure. I mean, it kind of really boils down to what your reason for grading it is. If you want to get something graded to just kind of hold on to forever, to lock in that condition, to say, I don't want to touch this, I want it, to stay in this shape, forever, I think it's great, especially if it's just for your, personal enjoyment or to pass it down to your kids or whatever. It's great to lock in that condition as it is. And then it also makes it easier to sell if, whoever wants to sell it online, because you can say, oh, this is, a 6.0 according to CGC. And so this is what I should get for it. Whereas if it's a raw book, it's easier to be, I guess, subjective. And even, CGC is a subjective opinion, albeit one that is recognized for the hobby. I mean, other pros are it is easier to sell. If that's your intention. A con is that you obviously can't read it anymore. I mean, once it's in the slab, you can't open it and enjoy anything but the front and the back. Unless you crack it open, obviously. Yeah, so I mean, for me personally, buying collections, I'll keep the books that I really like most people do, and then I'll sell some to finance the collection and the next collection and all that. So there are a lot of books that I submit with plans to resell, but then there's also books that I submit just to keep, for my personal collection. So I'm kind of all over the board as far as what I do, with CGC personally.
Good deal. All right, so let's go to question 5. So question 5, CBCS just recently announced that they raised their grading prices, right?
Mm-hmm.
And CGC did the same. Yeah, CGC did the same thing a while back. Do you think that is just a reflection of, the current economy, with the inflation that we're seeing? Or do you think that there were so many books being submitted that they were trying to slow down the number of submissions?
Again, I don't really have any personal experience, submitting to CBCS, but what were their turnaround times like, I guess, in the last month or two? Do you know what they have been like?
I don't know. I'm not a big grader of comic books.
Sure.
That's one of the reasons I found your channel interesting, because I like raw books. And when you're doing a lot of grading, kind of explain how it happens. And I mean, I have graded books, like you said, books that I want to keep, that I'm keeping in the PC long term, and I want to lock in the value, and I want to have a 9.8 of a book. I think I saw on your Instagram the other day you posted a Forever People 8.0 that you just picked up. Well, that's one of my favorite books. I love that cover. I love the Kirby cover. It's Dark Side, and I'm a big Dark Side fan. So I saw that. I actually just bought a raw copy for $100. I have several, but I just bought one that I think is a 9.8 candidate. Yeah, and so I'm going to get it, pressed and cleaned, and then I'm going to send it and have it graded. But no, I mean, I guess as far as just like even with CGC, for example, I mean, we can kind of take it there since that's who your experience is with. when CGC raised their prices, like, how as a collector did you feel? Like, were you like, man, they're gouging us as the collectors? Their turnaround times are a year. Like, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we can kind of talk about that just in general too.
Yeah.
But whether it's CBS or CGC, I think that price increases are always inevitable. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. I'm sure a part of it was to try to bring the turnaround times back down a little bit, because I know for a while there they were, I want to say 6 to 8 months just on regular modern. Maybe they're even 9 months. But especially if you have them press it and clean it, it's even more crazy. But I think a lot of changes really came into effect too when they got effectively bought out by the was it Blackstone?
Blackstone.
Yeah, Blackstone, which has a lot of high profile people that are involved in that. And so when something like that happens, when like a VC firm comes and buys out a company, they're looking for all the places that they can find to make more money, because they want to make money. I mean, that's why they buy it. They see the potential. They want to find areas that, even if it's just a little bit here and there, to increase that profit margin and all the things. So I think as far as people like me, when it raises it a few bucks here and there for, like the smallest ones, like a modern, I think it was maybe $4 increase or $5 now, I'm not sure. I'm very specific in what I send to CGC. I'm not one of those people that sends in tons of submissions a year. I maybe about 4 a year, I guess, which may sound like a lot to some people, but when you're buying collections, that can add up really quickly, especially if you have a lot of books in really nice shape. But it's definitely not fun, for sure. Especially on like the higher tiers, when the jump is a little more substantial. But yes, that's kind of made me rethink, maybe some books that, were kind of like, valued at $80 to $100. It's like maybe before, in a 9.8, that's what they're worth. But now, if it just hits a 9.6, it's like, do you do the pre-screen, wait longer, and then maybe, make, maybe $5-10 on it or something, or do you just try to sell it as raw, if it's your intention to sell it? But yeah, there's, what else can we talk about for CGC that's changed? They changed like the grading tier, or the membership tiers, so there used to be discounts on, what was it called? Maybe the premium tier. And now to get the grading discount, you have to go to elite. So there's been some changes there, but overall, there's always issues with any company. And when you're doing the amount of volume that CGC's been doing, the quality control has kind of suffered. I've seen a lot of videos lately where, somebody gets a book with, the wrong label on it, or, some crazy defect. And I've experienced that with like Newton rings a lot in the past, not so much, knock on wood, moving forward. But yeah, I'm just rambling now. So
no, that's fine. That's what as far as, but that's an interesting point that you bring up, is especially as someone who buys collections, and that the price increases really affect what books you might send. You're going to take a second glance at like a book that you may normally send. Yeah, I'd send this off and get it graded, because there's a $10-15 profit margin there. And if I sell, 50 books like that, I've made some money.
Mm-hmm.
So versus now you're looking at it like, well, it might not be worth the time and the effort to get it graded, to resell it because of the price increase. That's an interesting point that I don't know that anybody has really brought up on here, is that is something really, and it doesn't have to be specific. It's just really the grading companies in general. CBCS was the one that came up recently, that they increased theirs. But you had CGC a few months ago when everybody was all up in arms. But everybody was up in arms because the turn time sucked so bad. It was, you're increasing prices, and then, we can't get our books back for a year. And if you're a reseller, a book may be hot now, and in a year when you get it back graded, it's not hot anymore.
Yeah, and to kind of branch off that a little bit too, like, it's because there's a lot of people that are kind of like me that are collectors / dealers, I think, like with and we can probably talk about this later if you want to, but with the advent of whatnots and, live selling, there's been so many more people that are now, dealers, that it's kind of affected the market as well. But as far as the the turnaround times and all that. I mean, I appreciate that those are coming back down, and I think the price increases have affected that a bit. But I don't know that it's so substantial for people that are buying collections and planning on making a little bit of money off it. I mean, it's definitely in the back of your head, but like I go through my books probably at least 3-4 times each, to like make sure like before I send him my 25 books that these are the 25 I want to send in based on what I think might be happening in the market in the next 3-4 months versus what's happening right now.
Right, sure. No, that's a good point. Great point. All right, and so question 6 is something that you actually just said, and I saw this video on your channel. I haven't had a chance to watch it. And I thought, well, he's going to be on here, so I'm just going to ask.
Sure.
But you mentioned it, Newton rings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know what that is.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's some kind of ring that shows up in the slab when they send it back, but can you explain in detail like what a Newton ring is, what causes it, why that's a problem, etc.?
Sure. So I'll preface this by CGC's stance, to my knowledge right now, is that Newton rings are basically fixed, and that if you have a Newton ring issue that's that's really bad, they will fix it for you for free. They have a process that you go on their website through mechanical error, and then you can choose Newton rings, and then send it back, and as long as it's like egregious, they'll fix it. If it's just a tiny one, I mean, it's always better to email them first to say here's a photo of it, and then they'll say, yeah, do this process. So that out of the way, a Newton ring is basically an oily or watery appearance on the book when multiple layers of plastic or mylar are pressed together. It's named for, I believe it was Isaac Newton that like actually found this. I wrote in a little blurb in my video about it, but I don't remember what it says exactly. But it's when these layers of plastic press together, and they're pressed with such pressure, and it's usually only, I think it's because is it 2, maybe even 3 layers on the slab, because you have the inner well, the outer well, maybe it's just 2, but the amount of pressure causes that weird look to happen. And like I've actually tried to experiment and try to like remove them like on my end without sending them back, and I've had temporary like alleviation from that, I guess, but it's never really held. Like I've even got like suction cups and like basically tried to pull it apart, and it holds for a minute, and then even if you heat up the edges, it just doesn't doesn't hold. So it's not anything wrong with the book. It's purely cosmetic. That for the longest time, CGC was just like, this is a side effect of the process. We're working on it. If it's really bad, send it back to us and we'll fix it. But yeah, it's nothing wrong with the book. It's not water, oil. It's just that plastic pressing together, and it looks terrible on really dark, like black covers especially.
Oh wow, okay. So, but it is something that they are saying that they have the, kind of have a fix for, and something that is being, I guess, resolved. And if it's really bad, you can send it back and get it fixed.
Yeah, and I do have kind of a tinfoil hat theory. It's nothing bad on CGC, but I think that they might have like their encapsulation equipment. I have a theory that maybe 1 or 2 of them are older, and when they're trying to catch up on books, they may use the older equipment as well that might not be as fine-tuned and dialed in to be as pristine as their new equipment. But again, I have no proof of that. It's just it seems like I'll get one submission that's like great, nothing, and then one that's bad, and I'm like, how is it this different from one submission to the other if it's on the same equipment? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. No, that's a great point. Yeah. No, maybe it is. They're trying to catch up. They're using old equipment, and it creates a Newton ring.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. All right. So question 7, we do this thing that we call explain this Instagram post. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, where I'm fairly new to you, and you haven't done a ton of content as of late, I found this picture. And, you've mentioned it, multiple times in the video that you do buy collections. And so I saw this. So talk about this post right here and what this is.
Yeah, so this was just, I think about a week ago, or I guess your screenshot says 4 days ago. I'm not sure if that's, is it? Yeah.
I screenshot it today. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I just got this. There's actually, I don't do much on Facebook. I've tried to sell stuff on Facebook, and people always flake out, and it's not like I'm asking crazy prices. So I just try to stay away from there. But I saw this post for so long that there was a person, locally that had this large collection, and they were asking, like, I think it originally said like $2,000, and it was just marked down, marked down, and marked down, and then it seems like they had some people contact them and say, "Oh yeah, it's worth this." They want to give them pennies for it, and then like somebody recommended that they split it up into individual lots. And so at that point, I don't even think that I knew it was the same collection at this point. So I contacted this person, and they said they kind of gave me, that info that they had been recommended to break it down into lots. And so there was like 2 lots I was interested in, because I mean, I hadn't even seen the whole collection at that point. So I went to look at these 2 lots. We met up in a public place, and we got to kind of talking a lot. I think I probably talked to this lady for about maybe 45 minutes or an hour, just all sorts of things, about different aspects of collecting and all that. And long story short, she helps people that are moving into like retirement homes, basically. And so, like, not really like an estate sale, kind of, but like the person's usually alive. Sometimes, she deals with other situations, but and found out that it was a gentleman's collection, that it was a lot of Marvel, which was nice. And then there's also, well, it was mostly like Silver Age, some Bronze Age, and then there's some modern that he had bought for his son more recently. But anyway, yeah. So I basically only looked at probably, it was like 2 of those bins that you saw, and there were 8 bins total. And we had worked out a price for those 2 bins, and she was just like, I'd really just like somebody to take everything. So we talked about it. I basically bought the rest of it unseen, just as a bulk price, because she was at the point that she had so many lowball offers and didn't want to deal with it, and I was going to pay her fairly enough that and she showed me like a few photos. There wasn't really any like giant keys or anything, but I was just like, yeah, this is what I can pay, per book, and she was happy with that. So we agreed on the price, and I brought the whole collection home, and my wife wasn't too upset.
Right. So let me ask you this, and I was asking someone this the other day. When you buy collections, because it's something that I am semi-interested in doing. Sure. Again, just as another facet of the hobby, and I enjoy the resale part of it as well. And I had an uncle, I talk about this a lot. I had an uncle that resold comic books and did things like that. When you're out looking at a collection, like let's take this collection, for example, and break it down, is there a price per book that you're willing to give? Like I've heard people tell me, look, if you're buying in bulk and you're, looking to resell, it's $25 a short box. You go 50 a long box. Probably shakes out to about 10 cents a comic, I guess, roughly. Is there a formula that you go by when you're buying collections that you wouldn't care to share, or at least tips when you're buying, like kind of money-wise, what people should expect when they're selling collections, or what people should expect to pay when they're buying them?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I definitely think if you're dealing with, someone buying in bulk, you need to be prepared to take that bulk price. A lot of sellers, understand that their books are valuable. And usually what I do personally is I don't want there to be, many surprises at all. I don't really buy a lot of bulk collections where I don't know what's in it. It just happened to be the price we agreed on. I was happy with, and she was happy with. But most of the time, I mean, I think the largest collection I've ever bought was maybe 8 or 10 long boxes. So I've never done any huge collections, and really not a lot of super old stuff. Usually there'll be, some old stuff here and there, older than, bronze or silver, really. Right. But as far as what to pay, it really all depends kind of what your reason for doing it is. If you're looking to flip it, obviously, you want to make sure to work out your economics that, based on condition, based on what it is. I think you're kind of right on the money there for like the going rate for a long box of just random stuff that might not be worth a whole ton is probably about $50 right now. It used to be, for years it was $20, $30, $40. And now, with the slight increase, I mean, just because based off of the time and effort of going through the box, listing each one, pricing each one by one, no matter how you do it, it's all about that value of time, and whether the seller wants to take that time and do it one by one and get the most money, or if they just want to pass it on to somebody that wants to do that work. I mean, there needs to be some reason there why the seller, why the buyer would buy it. And since they're the one putting in that effort, you have to understand it's going to be less than you would get, selling it yourself. As far as what I pay, yeah, like on that collection that I got, it was right around that $50 long box price, I'd say, give or take. I did pay more for those 2 lots I was first interested in. I think it was probably about a long box worth, and I think I ended up paying about $200 for that long box because I knew what was in that. There was like the nicest book I got, I think, was the Batman Harley Quinn like trade paperback, the first printing of it, the black cover. But other than that, I mean, there were a couple, $10 books in there, but usually what I try to do on smaller collections is I'll actually go through every book and I will pull out the really big, key issues and say, like, I'll basically pay, somewhere usually between 40 to 60% on those, depending what I want them for. If it's my personal collection and it's a book I've been looking for a while and a really nice book, sometimes I can go more than that if it's like, something crazy. Just to be as fair as I can with that seller. But then, like, for the bulk of it, even, like the $5 books and stuff like that, $5, $10 books, that is usually worked into the bulk price, just, is because for every $5, $10 book, you're probably going to have a book that you can't, get $1 for. So,
right. When you buy these books and you're reselling them, like when you piece them out, so like you said, a lot of times you'll come through, you'll process the collection, and say you've got 20 good books that are worth $10 up that maybe you can sell on eBay or whatever. Like, how do you move the collection? Like, do you bulk out?
Well,
like the dollar books, like books that are $1, are you able to bulk those out? Like, what's the process for you as far as going through the resale?
Sure. So, usually what I do is, I'll try to pull out, all of like the keys that I know first, and then go back through eventually, like a second or third run just to make sure I didn't miss anything. As far as, like the bigger books, and obviously based on condition. And then kind of after that, I'll go through because I actually sell in person at usually 1 to 3 conventions per year. So that's helpful. And I started doing that probably before I really started selling a lot of books online. Really, like, I'm an eBay store, I mainly try to focus on graded stuff because it's easier to sell, easier to list. I have a nice scanner I got that really makes a nice good scan. But as far as bulking out like the dollar and under books, I think that's a constant struggle just because, like, a lot of times I know what I have into them, and then like I'll bring my dollar boxes to shows as well. I usually have 2 to 5 boxes of just dollar books. And then I have a sliding scale where it starts at $1 and then it goes down to like 40, 50 cents if somebody wants to buy a bunch of them. So
right.
I don't ask like a ton for these books. It's just a matter of finding buyers for things like just random image books, or even some of the Superman titles. There's just not a lot of people buying them, so it's kind of hard to find people like that. I have sold on a platform called Pop Shop Live. I don't know if you've heard about that.
I haven't heard that.
So they were actually out, I think, maybe even a little before Whatnot, or maybe around the same time. But there aren't a lot of comic sellers on there. I usually do a show every 3-4 months ish, and so I mean that's just a small way. Like I'll just have these like really little mystery boxes that are just random books that I sell for, I think it's 12 of them for $10 or something like that. So yeah, I mean, and there's like some decent stuff in a lot of those too. Sometimes I put small first appearances, but I'm very cautious on like making the mystery boxes as well, because I do all levels of mystery boxes. I always make sure it's worth at least 10-20% more than whatever I'm asking, because I don't want to rip anybody off.
Right.
And I wouldn't want that. I mean, I've been in that situation where I'm not going to name any names, but I'll buy like a mystery box from a large company, and then it's just like, where are these prices coming from? But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But as far as unloading like the dollar books, the last show that I did, I had like 6.5 boxes of dollar books, and there was one of the other dealers that was there that just made me an offer on everything. I kind of thought about it. I was like, yeah, I've had some of these books for a couple shows. I'm ready to let them go. So I basically both them out to another dealer, and then he's going to try to get more, and then slowly dwindle that down, and they'll find their ways to hundreds of homes, which is kind of cool to think about. Just like a collection that I buy here in Iowa, may end up all over the country because it's
right. No, I mean, and it's just interesting. And that's why I wanted to ask, because as far as the process of what that goes through, like how, obviously you're going to try to keep them, make as much money. If you've got 10 cents into the book and you can get a buck out of it, that's a good return, right? It's a good return on your investment.
I mean,
you're not going to be able to sell all of them.
To clarify on that, I don't know that I ever go as low as 10 cents. I think at $50 a long box, it's usually about 25 cents a book. But yeah, I mean, whatever the return is, yeah, that's, I mean, as even on the sliding scale, sometimes like if somebody gets a stack of 50, I think at like 50 books is when I go down to 40 cents a book. So then, $20 for, 50 books isn't too bad.
Well, no, that's not. I mean, that's not bad. I mean, as far as if you're, breaking out a collection and reselling it, it's just, that's one thing I think when people are thinking about buying collections and selling them, is there's a lot of work that really goes into it. And you've got to understand that you might have 10 to 20 books that are going to have some real value, that maybe you can turn a decent number on. The rest of it is going to be a slow grind, as you kind of move it around, and it really just depends on, like you said earlier, what you're buying the collection for. Are you buying it to keep some pieces for yourself? Are you buying it to fund the hobby? Are you buying it to, actually make money on? And so it just really kind of all depends on why you're buying it and how you have to approach the resale part of it. So I just think that's interesting. So I did want to ask about Whatnot and some of the other platforms. We'll make this question 8. As far as a reseller yourself, eBay just recently announced that they're going to come out with like a live form of, selling, similar to what Whatnot's doing. How do you see the future of apps like that for a reseller or even for buyers? You think that's the future of, how most of this stuff's going to get sold?
Well, it's definitely opened up the option for more and more people. I think that Whatnot makes it fairly easy to apply to be a seller. They have a process where they just kind of verify you. And I think all of them probably do that. I haven't really honestly read up much on the eBay offering. I'm curious about that, what their fees are going to be like. But it makes a lot of sense that eBay is, seeing that, the amount of traffic that Whatnot gets and, Pop Shop Live. But really Pop Shop Live real quick, they're more kind of focused on, I mean, there are comic sellers there. They have a big market in like the vintage clothing and other collectibles like toys and stuff. There's not a lot of comic sellers on there. Maybe 20 or 30, I'd say. As opposed to Whatnot, anytime you log in, you can see 1,000 shows, scheduled for the near future, basically.
Right.
But I think all these are definitely bringing more I guess more people that were either collectors and now they see how easy it is to, sell on a place like Whatnot. And in a way, I think that's really kind of hurt the market for a lot of books. I mean, I think Whatnot is great for selling things like, maybe $5 to $10 books and under if you're a small seller. If you have a huge following, and you can get hundreds of people in your show, then, some of those books will go for way more than they even should. But it'll be really interesting to see how eBay handles it and what their fee structure is like, if it's going to be similar to their live listings, higher, lower. I'm very curious. In some ways, it's nice that I guess more books are going to be out there and available, but I don't know. It's hard not to feel like it's kind of oversaturated right now because everybody has become a seller almost.
Right. Yeah. I know everybody is so easy to just hop on a Whatnot app or even eBay, and like for me, I resell books. I resell some on eBay. I do some stuff locally, not shows or anything like that, but just connections I have. I do some things locally when I get books. But if I'm buying a book, like it's almost second nature to go to eBay.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost immediately I go to eBay because there's so much, Whatnot's a little different. I'm going to have to get on there. I'm going to bid. Maybe I get a deal, but the time commitment is a little more than I have to sit and watch an auction. And, I can go to eBay on my own time and sit and I can search something up. I can look for what I want and then, price it out, make offers, things like that. So I just wondered as far as how someone like you who's reselling a lot, how you view that, or even as a collector, how you view that.
Yeah, so I've honestly done one Whatnot show so far. I've done maybe about a dozen Pop Shop Live shows. So I'm not like honestly a big time seller. I think my eBay store has about 10 or 15 listings on it right now. Just, some of the higher end stuff that I'd like to move to be able to, finance my own collection. Especially probably starting about a year or two before the pandemic, I started buying a lot more collections, and it just finding that time to actually go through and sell them and say, this is what I want to get rid of. I definitely need to be in more of a sell mode now than a buy mode, but I'm always buying stuff, for my own collection as well. And I mean, fortunately, there's been a lot of good opportunities in the past year-ish, for me to add to my own collection. But I mean, like I have those Grail books as well, like an X-Men #1 I've never had. I'd really like to own one. And if I could just stop myself from buying these little things along the way, I could probably afford one. But it's just getting like the little, dopamine hit of, getting the, the book you've been after. It's like, yeah, first Swamp Thing, great. That's like $1,000. It's not, $10,000 plus for an X-Men, but it's a book I wanted. But
Right.
I'm straying from the question again. I'm sorry.
You're fine. No, I love it because it's brought up a lot of interesting topics. I mean, that's part of the fun of doing this. So,
yeah.
But we're as far as time's concerned, we'll move to question 9. And again, I just kind of like to get, different collectors and even, like I said, people who sell somewhat. I kind of like to get their thoughts on these. There's a lot of videos out right now, a lot of talk about the comic book market crashing, and I wanted to know your thoughts as far as why you think that may be. Well, first off, is the comic book market crashing? And if it is, why do you think that is?
Sure. I don't think I would call this a crash right now. I mean, like, look at any investments, securities, stocks, everything's down. As far as comics go, we've been due for a correction for a long time. Just like stocks, like it can't constantly be going up, 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 and up. There's always going to be a down at some point, and just how far that down goes is going to be decided. But honestly, we even saw this at like the start of the pandemic with stocks. Like when that hit, everybody panicked, sold. Everybody was like, the sky is falling. We're never going to come out of this. And then sure enough, a couple years later, actually a very short amount later, when like the stock market was, going down, people were putting their money into comics. And then it was harder to get books because there were no in-person shows. It was all eBay. And so the market was effectively shrunk to the amount of books that you could get. And then, things like Whatnot happened. And so it's a very weird time, but I wouldn't say it's a crash any more so than you would say that we're in a recession. In that everything, prices of, gas and everything are constantly going up. But comics specific, okay, let me back up just a little bit. The way the comics crash of, the 90s happened, really, I don't think we're in the same territory. I think it's similar in ways that print runs are massively inflated right now, but still not to the point of the 90s, like 5-6 million print run for X-Men #1 or whatever in 1990 right. or whatever it was. We're not there, but we're having tons of variant covers that, in my opinion, are kind of excessive. When there's a limited series that's got 5 issues and we got 20 some variant covers or 100 variant covers, if you like that for the art, great. But I'm all for artists, getting more money. But as far as the effect on the market as a whole, I think it's not great. But to answer that question more succinctly, I guess I wouldn't call it a crash, more of a correction that's been due. And inevitably, when the economy comes back a little bit, I think that'll start to kind of level out more than it already has.
Right. Well, that's the, something that a lot of people don't talk about is the inflation, right? And the cost of everything else is up right now. Mm-hmm. So you have less disposable income. And if you have less disposable income, you can't buy as many comics or you can't pay as much for a comic. And so it's, supply and demand, right? It's basic supply and demand. If the demand is not there and there is a supply, then the price comes down. If the demand is high and there's not a big supply, the price goes up. And that's what you're kind of seeing right now is the demand for, I agree with you that there is a correction taking place. It's not a crash. Your blue chips are always going to be up. They're always going to increase in value because that's what they are. They're blue chips. the variants, that have flooded the market, all those different things where there's FOMO and, prices go up and then they immediately come down. There's these really hot covers a lot of times, especially variant covers, that'll be $20, $30, on new comic book day. And if you wait 6 months, you can pick that book up for $5, for cover price, sometimes less than cover. And so I agree with you. There is a correction. And I think that's where the majority of the correction will take place, is it's not in your blue chips. I think your blue chips will maybe they won't increase in the same as fast or in the same amounts as they have been the last few years, but I think they will always kind of continually increase in value, and the correction will happen in the other areas of the hobby. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it'll be wide reaching. I mean, I honestly hope that's how the the correction pans out, that we get a little bit less variant covers. I mean, like I think the incentive covers are a very interesting aspect as well, because there's like the 1 in 100 variants, the 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 sometimes, and it's weird, like the way that the print runs are being inflated in that way, because like specifically the Keanu Reeves variant, for Berserker, I remember I think that was like a 1,000 to 1 or something, maybe more than that, and so just there's really no reason other than to get the print run higher and make more money that's been done. They could have made that cover the 1 in 25, or not made as many different ones. So I honestly don't know who's buying those covers. I mean, if you love the art, great, but if it's an investment, that's the worst advice I could give you if you're looking to buy comics as an investment, to buy those 1 in 1,000s of new comics. But so I hope that's where most of the print runs get shrunk down, honestly. But
yeah, no, that's a great point, I think. What about the variant market? Like, you've got companies, that Spider-Man booth, Mutant Beaver. There's a bunch of companies out there that specialize in variant covers. What's your thoughts on companies like that and how they're placed in the market?
Sure. I mean, that's definitely an interesting aspect of it. I mean, I definitely want them to make money, and I'm all for them working with artists, and all that. I think that I feel less strongly about those than I do the massive like incentive covers that are actually put out by the publishers and there's no individual store involved. The ones that the individual stores do, I think, are a great opportunity for those, especially the smaller stores, to get some revenue. I think there's a lot more. I don't know. It's so subjective that the art that we like is very personal, and I don't want to say that I've never seen any of those. There have been a few here and there that I absolutely love, and I'm like, I have to get that for my personal collection. But personally, I would never buy those as an investment. I mean, I would buy those because I like the art, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I think that is probably where those guys have a place in the market. Yeah. It's different. It's about the art. The cost isn't, like crazy, I mean,
it's not like $20-$30 sometimes.
Right. It's not crazy. If there's a dope cover, like I'm a big Star Wars fan. And so there's been some Star Wars covers that I just love, that are just gorgeous to me that I've picked up for my PC. Not necessarily because I intend to resell them or make money on them. I just like them. And their print runs are smaller and they're a little more controlled because they're running a business. And so, how many of these can you really sell versus how many you buy? I mean, there's a lot of calculations going on in there. It's not done specifically to make a comic book store buy 1,000 copies of Berserker so that they can get, the 1 in 1,000 variant. So, yeah, I definitely think there's a place for that. And I think there always will be. And I like what you said. It helps the artist, right? Because a lot of what we love about these comic books is the art. It's a lot of what draws you to it. And if these artists can make more money and, and survive and live and keep putting these things out for people like us to consume, I think more power to them.
Definitely. I completely agree with that.
Yeah. So, all right, man, good deal. All right. So question 10, just kind of a softball, our conversation has been primarily comic books. Any hobbies outside of comics? Anything that you like to do? Are you into sports, movies, music? Like, what are you into?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always been like a video game fan. I don't really play a lot of games lately. I really want to pick up that new Shredder's Revenge game. I think that just came out. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's kind of like the arcade look of the old TMNT arcade style. So I'm probably gonna try that today or tomorrow. I've been looking forward to that. Yeah, I mean, obviously movies, music. I have way too many hobbies, honestly.
Me too.
And and it's kind of a struggle to find time for all of them. Like I played guitar for a long time. I dabble on the keyboard. I make music. What else? I'm into video production, which I kind of use a little bit on my channel to make it look a little polished. And I'm very intricate, and like I have a little set here and stuff. So as far as laying out, graphic design, I was a graphic designer for about 15 years, and then I moved into video production, and now my day job I kind of do all that stuff. So art, going to museums and stuff, traveling.
Cool.
Like I like to keep busy.
I like it, man. Good deal. Well, look, brother, I've had a great time. Thank you so much for coming on and hanging out and answering these 10 questions, as I like to say, that turns into 50. But no, I've had a great time. Hope you had fun. Where can folks find you right now? As far as, I know you said you're getting ready to make some more YouTube content, and I'll link the YouTube and his Instagram down below. Any other places where people can find you if they want to check you out?
Yeah. So, I mean, really the easiest place is just go to nocoastcomics.com, and I have a link tree that has all my links in there. But I mean, you can find me on Instagram, eBay, YouTube, obviously. I do have my Whatnot. I may try to do some more Whatnot shows in the future, Pop Shop Live. But yeah, definitely nocoastcomics.com. You can find everywhere I'm at. So
good deal, man. Well, like I said, brother, appreciate you coming on today. And as I said, guys, I'll link everything down below. I'll go find his link tree, post it down there so you guys will know where to find our guy, No Coast Comics. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for hanging out with us. This has been 10 Questions.